Humanity's Revelations in Ascension. Channeled Galactic Knowledge in Earth's Awakening. Written and read by Sarah Ariana. Preface. In a time of upheaval and chaos, we offer light to guide each soul on its path to ascension. We are the Divine Light Collective and present this final book to humanity. In this third book of Revelations, we bring forward channeled knowledge, lessons, and stories from the galactic worlds that will now be bestowed upon humanity. This information is of a high frequency. We recommend grounding yourself before listening to each chapter and not rushing through the book. There is a process in moving through the chapters, for activations and shifts of light will flow through you. Each chapter will have an unraveling in your energy, a wake-up within your being. After listening to each chapter, take the time to write down the messages of awareness that will come through you. Sit with your insights and then take the hours and days to integrate the releasing, clearing, and activations before moving on to the next chapter. Releasing. There are various ways that the human soul can release trauma, energy, and what no longer serves them. Releasing can be through emotions, laughing, crying, or yelling out in pain, anger, fear, or joy. In whichever way you choose to release your emotions, we recommend releasing them in a safe way that you see fit. If a human holds on to painful emotions, this can cause turmoil in the body and manifest into physical ailment or dis-ease within your vessel. Humans can also release energy physically through movements such as dancing, walking, swimming, martial arts, yoga, cycling, and playing sports. Please be advised, too much exercise can cause harm to the physical vessel. Balanced awareness is needed with physical activity. Mentally, humans can release energy through journaling, talking to a therapist, meditation, or sitting in contemplation. These activities are very beneficial for removing mental blocks and understanding one's epiphanies and experiences throughout the day. Clearing. Clearing your energy can be done through movement, soaking in salt baths, smoke cleansing, and using crystals to clear your space and energy fields. There are many other ways to clear your energy. Find what works best for you and be open to these ways changing over time as you grow and expand. Activations. The activations in this book can bring your soul to stillness. Your body may need time to rest and integrate the activations that will come through. If this is the case, trust your body because it knows what it is doing. If you feel dizzy and cannot stand after the activation, rest, as these sensations will pass. Afterward, thank your body for doing an incredible job of integrating the light within you. Please honor the intensity of this vibration, for it is not to be taken lightly or with fear. This knowledge is our gift to Earth and the humans living upon her. Once again, it is our honor to present galactic wisdom from the star races and outer worlds to share with humanity as your species shifts into a world of unity, love, and peace. We are the Divine Light Collective. A note from Sarah Ariana. Hello, dear listener. Thank you for being part of this journey. You'll find at the beginning of some of the chapters I describe my experience and how that particular chapter came to be. I wanted to share to let you know you're not alone, as you may have also gone through such events or will in the future. The main energy throughout this book is from the Divine Light Collective, as they speak for many of the star races that came forward, with the exception of a few chapters. In these chapters, the light beings wanted to speak directly to the listener. It was a privilege to channel these books for humanity in collaboration with the Divine Light Collective and the many galactic light beings that came forward. Love to all. Sarah Ariana. Chapter 1. I began channeling and writing Chapter 1 at the end of the summer. I was taking a break outside as I had just finished Book 2. I had channeled daily for the past 2 months and needed time just to be. I was lying down on our backyard deck looking at the clouds, and as I lay there, distant clouds began to take shape. The clouds formed into an image of a cat with a white, elaborate, feathered headdress. The clouds changed again into another cat sitting on a throne, and changed shape one last time into a small cat face with a massive mane. The entire time this occurred, I desperately wanted to grab my camera and take a picture of these cloud beings. However, I could not take my eyes off of the clouds as I began receiving a message. This group of cat beings called themselves the Lyrans, and they would be the first star race to come forward with a memory that happened on their planet long ago. They wanted to give insight to humanity as what is occurring on Earth has happened for millennia on other planets. The reason there are so many species that are coming forward to help at this time is that the tyranny ends here on Earth. The scales are unbalanced, and too much manipulation and deceit have occurred on Earth for far too long. The Lyrans. Millions of years ago, there was a planet in the Lyra constellation. There are numerous planets in this constellation, and planet exploration occurred within the species that resided there. This species is called the Lyrans, and they exist to this day. The Lyrans are a feline humanoid species with similar traits to humans in society and hierarchy. However, the Lyrans did not have the extensive range between the poor and rich as humans have today. They did have well-to-do Lyrans, but the majority of Lyrans were indifferent. Most of this feline species did not seek power over others. They enjoyed their lives of freedom, loved the vessel they were in, and how they moved with the energy. What does that look like for a Lyran? When they felt like doing something, that's what they did. There was no entrapment within the ego. The Lyrans like to have a mate to enjoy life with and do not have as many children as humans. One baby is the norm within a partnership. Most Lyrans wear clothing, and some placed feather headpieces on their heads, much like humans did in the previous centuries on Earth. We are explaining how the Lyrans once were to provide a foundation for the memory that now begins. Makikikana was a Lyran judge that looked after the disputes in her society. She was a female Lyran with wisdom, strength, and insight, and could see many resolutions to the Lyrans' issues. She was a revered judge and enjoyed her job immensely. She felt she had a purpose and was aware of her gifts and how these could help her kind. What started in the Lyra constellation gradually began with a few Lyrans who didn't see eye to eye with the others. This particular group wanted more than the rest, and it began to increase and fester. Makikikana started to witness more and more complaints from those higher up in society. They wanted separation and distance from the rest of the population. This newly formed group called themselves the elite. and began to have lavish parties where they would dress in costume. They acted with such vindictiveness towards any other Lyran who did not maintain the status quo in society. Makikikana began to see the writing on the wall as this ridiculousness took over within the elite. However, before her eyes, in a very short amount of time, this way became what the majority of society soon wanted. When Makikikana was walking in the city, she noticed an increasing number of Lyrans wearing costumes. They had monstrous headpieces over their heads and fur. The bigger, the better. In some cases, the Lyran's face would appear very tiny compared to the feathers and fur surrounding their head. This way of thinking was overtaking the entire race of the Lyrans. And Makikikana was beginning to feel like an outcast, even with all of her years of service and goodwill towards others. Makikikana secretly formed a group of like-minded friends that were on the same page as her. She wanted to know more about this core group of elites, their motive, and what they wanted to achieve. In Makikikana's evenings, she and her group gathered in costume to attend these so-called parties. Once there, they discovered a sickening amount of food and drink on display. In the air, you could feel the pompous attitudes of the ones that craved power and their need to change society. Makikikana and her companions observed night after night the comings and goings of this group called the Elite. It was after a week of late-night parties and too much eating. Makikikana noticed a quick blurring around one of the Elite. When she looked again, it was gone. Makikikana looked around discreetly at her friends to see if they had seen what she had just witnessed. And yes, their eyes were as wide as Makikikana's. What had just happened? What was the blurring? Makikikana and her loyal companions quietly left the party and met in her chambers at the courthouse. What they had seen was out of their realm of expertise and knowledge. As they talked and ran over their many ideas, the one thought that kept coming back was that either the Elite was a hologram, a piece of technology that covered up what these Lyrans were, or this group had found a way to control the masses with some kind of illusion. Whatever was happening, they knew what they saw was some kind of cover-up. But why? The energy that surrounded the Elite was one of false pretenses. It was astonishing for Makikikana to see how most Lyrans had changed their views on the Elite in such a short amount of time. Lyrans are a very intuitive, sensitive species. Each Lyran has the foresight and awareness built in their DNA. When Lyrans are on top of their game, they look out for one another. They're independent and flow with the energy at hand. When a Lyran is off their game, they can be arrogant and stubborn. It was their way or the highway. Makikikana and her friends went home for the night. They needed a good night's rest to think about what had happened. In the morning, they were hoping new ideas would come forward. When morning arrived, Makikikana was more confused than ever. She hadn't slept and was not feeling well after a week of staying up late and overindulging. Makikikana got ready to be at court, and an idea began to form in her tired state. She needed to seek out the elders' advice. This matter must be done in care, Makikikana thought. She wanted no other to get wind of her snooping and asking questions. She must tread lightly. Makikikana felt the Elite were something else, which didn't sit well with her. All of this created a bad taste in her mouth and knots in her stomach. She knew something was off and was determined to find out what the elite were and what they wanted. Makikikana arrived at her chambers and proceeded to get ready as she put on her courthouse wig. Her door suddenly opened with a loud bang, and 2 elite Lyran were before her that had been at the party the night before. The one that had shimmered and blurred was now standing in front of her, smirking. Makikikana, a pleasure to meet your acquaintance. I am Lord Leo, and this is my colleague Shaqueen. We took notice of you and your friends last night and have come to check on you to make sure you are all right as you left in such a hurry, Lord Leo said. Makikikana knew this game of cat and mouse, and there was no way she would cower in her chambers. But she didn't know who or what she was dealing with. She also knew if she told them to get out, this would raise a red flag that she knew something was up. She decided to go along with her game and play for now. Lord Leo, a pleasure. Makikikana reached over her paw for Lord Leo to kiss it. Very kind of you and your colleague to check up on me. I was not feeling well, and my friends took me home and stayed with me until I fell asleep. I was unaware of your courteous nature. Do you check up on all of your patrons as they leave your parties? Lord Leo watched Makikikana's every move and listened intently to her words. He was trying to read her and look to see if she was lying. Lord Leo was a slick Lyran who had advanced in society with his coercive ways and continued favors to get him to where he is today. He did not take lightly to the ones that would override him or take him down in any way or form. He had gotten too far in society to have all of this taken away by one female Lyran who shone justice out of her ass. Makikikana, I do not check up on just anyone. However, when one such as yourself upholds the law and sees to our society, I do take it upon myself to ensure that you are all right, Lord Leo purred. Makikikana had had enough. Lord Leo was taking up her time. Every word he spoke dripped with sarcasm and vengeance. He couldn't stand her as much as she couldn't stand him. They were at odds with each other, and she wanted this rude interruption to be over with. Lord Leo, as you can see, I am feeling much better now and must go as I have others waiting for me and decisions to make. Is there anything else that you need? Makikikana said. And that was the opportunity Lord Leo was waiting for. His invitation to watch her more closely. Makikikana, I would very much like to watch your proceedings today, if you don't mind. I have the day free of obligations. I would like to offer my services to you and others with conflicts today. You won't hear a peep from me. I am here to support you and the other members of our Lyran community. Makikikana was flabbergasted. What was going on? This interruption was more than a check-in on her. Something was brewing, and she felt sick from being in his presence for too long. Unfortunately, no spectators are allowed in today's proceedings, Lord Leo. That is kind of you to offer your services, and I thank you. But I am now late and must bid you farewell, for I cannot keep the court waiting any longer. I bid you good day. And with that, Makikikana grabbed her judge's robe and closed the door behind her, leaving Lord Leo and Shaqueen alone in her chambers. Lord Leo sensed that Makikikana knew something from last night. He was sure of it. He had no qualms about relieving another of its life. It would be easier to control the masses by taking out those that suspected him and the others. He and his colleagues had already found ways to lure the population with the illusion of self-significance, showing with who you interact with is paramount. Little by little, they were changing the ways of the Lyrans and diminishing their ability to think independently, taking away their instincts to navigate through life. They had the majority eating out of their paws with this new way of society. Something a bit flashier, louder, and more enticing always worked. Lord Leo and Chiqueen left the judge's quarters. And as for Makikikana, she managed to get to the courtroom. However, she was shaken to her core. The only ones that could see what was happening were herself and her companions. Everyone else seemed to be moving into a spell they couldn't wake up from. Makikikana did her best to put her thoughts aside and focus on each case. After hours of proceedings and making decisions that would benefit both parties in the long run, she saw one last lawsuit before her workday ended. The Lyrans before her were a mother and her cub as the defendants, and on the other side was the plaintiff, a male Lyran that seemed over-domineering at first glance. Both parties spoke of their cases. This was a dispute between the landlord and tenant. The landlord wanted the tenant to leave his residence as she was not pregnant when she first signed the original agreement, which stated that only one Lyran was to occupy his rented space. Makikikana could once again see both sides. She saw how the original contract needed to be upheld. However, one could also see the defendant's circumstances when seen through eyes of compassion. This case was not as clear-cut as she initially thought. Makikikana took a moment to take a brief recess to come to a resolution. In some cases, she needed to take a moment away from both parties, as Makikikana could feel their emotions deeply, which could cloud her decision. She stepped into her chambers and took a few deep breaths, and instantly she started to calm down. As Makikikana closed her eyes, a picture began to form in her mind. She saw the defendant and her cub happy at another residence in the same area, but far enough away from the plaintiff. Makikikana also saw the plaintiff with a new tenant. However, the same energy surrounding the defendant remained in the plaintiff's rented space. The plaintiff had recently lost family members and felt his life was spinning out of control. The only thing he felt any power over was the contracts with his tenants. He didn't realize that he was scaring them away with his authoritative and oppressive ways, creating an unpleasant atmosphere. Makikikana opened her eyes and sat back in her chair. She knew what her decision would be. Both parties were satisfied when Makikikana gave her final verdict for the defendant to find a new place with a 3-month move-out date. Makikikana knew there would be no resolution for the plaintiff if she shared her insights with him. This was his journey, and he would find his way. Makikikana knew the defendant and her cub would be happy when they found their new residence. Their outcome looked promising. Now, if only Makikikana could see what was happening with Lord Leo and Chiqueen. Makikikana headed out for the evening and locked the premises. The Lyrans have no keys that humans currently use. There are devices outside the doors that would lock when you scanned your paw. When Makikikana got home and settled down for the evening, she replayed Lord Leo's chamber visit in her mind. Was she the only one who saw what was happening beside her friends? She needed answers and decided if she couldn't get it tonight through meditation, she would seek help from the elders in the morning. Makikikana lay on her bed and took a few slow, deep breaths. She relaxed her body and continued to breathe. After a few minutes, a vision began to form. Makikikana saw 7 wisps of black energy hover above her planet. She sensed the energy conversing and communicating amongst itself. These wisps of black energy then joined, forming into a dark ball, and with lightning speed dove to her planet. Makikikana saw this dark ball of energy separate back into dark wisps and disappear into her community. But not before she saw a slight blurring and shimmering coming from the wisps. It clicked. The blurring Makikikana saw the party were these black wisps of energy. They had attached themselves to some of her fellow Lyrans. Makikikana also felt that once these wisps were connected, they whispered into the ears of the Lyran. Makikikana knew this black energy offered the Lyran a lifestyle that appealed to them if they allowed the wisps to attach themselves to their bodies. Makikikana noticed the wisps would observe the Lyran before making an offer. Makikikana saw that the wisps chose the Lyrans whose light would shine brightly, but lacked confidence in themselves. These Lyrans also had a weaker constitution, and the wisps took advantage of this and struck a deal. The wisp offered in due time that the Lyran would be a somebody. They would have recognition of their status in society. Once the agreement was made, the wisp would attach to the Lyran's body. For some Lyran, this sounded too good to be true, and they asked the question, what did the attachment entail? A mere feeding of your light only once in a while, the wisp would say. You might want to nap, but you really won't feel a thing. You will have a life that everyone else will want. The wisps quickly found 7 Lyrans to attach to and began their feeding, which increased daily. This feeding took the Lyran's light, their life force. As the wisps got stronger and stronger, their whispers of persuasion became louder. Each time a question would pop up in the Lyran's mind, the wisp would present only answers with dark themes of resolution and distraction. The Lyrans with these attachments no longer had a chance of separation from the wisps, for their minds and energies were now being controlled. Makikikana breathed in a gasp and opened her eyes. This vision was upsetting and disturbing. Makikikana slowly sat up and placed her paws on the floor to ground her energy. She shakily stood up and went to get a drink of water. She needed a moment to process what she had just seen. Makikikana trusted her visions. This was not up for debate. The question that arose is why? Why did this energy come and seek out her planet and attach itself to her fellow Lyrans? What did they gain in attaching themselves to others? The wisps needed to feed, and she could feel them. She knew they were dark. Why did they need to feed? Why could they not maintain their form? Who were the wisps? Makikikana was too tired to focus on these questions on her own. She called her friends over to discuss these new revelations. Makikikana's tribe of trusted companions arrived shortly after, and Makikikana described her vision in detail. Some might call Makikikana a psychic or a seer. Makikikana liked to keep her abilities to herself and did not advertise her gifts to anyone other than her close circle. Her friends sat stunned by this new information. This energy took what it wanted and was not easily dealt with. It felt like to Makihikana and her friends that these wisps would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. So where did this leave them? How would Makihikana and her companions manage their day-to-day activities and lives, knowing something was attached to the 7 Lyrans that were now changing their society? Time was of the essence, and Makihikana used her judge status for the first time to her advantage. Makihikana and her friends devised a plan to ask these 7 Lyrans if they would consider being a jury for one of her upcoming cases. She wanted them to believe this was a prestigious job and one of high rank. Makihikana would explain there are no other Lyrans that she felt could handle this type of decision for this case. Makihikana wanted them to know, due to their highly respected way they present themselves in society, that this was their job if they wanted it. Little would they know that they would be on trial. Makihikana set the plan in motion and went to see the elders. Makihikana asked the elders if they had heard of anything like this before in the cosmos. She soon discovered that yes, there was a group that had fallen. 7 beings took to feeding off of others and moved from planet to planet, causing disruption and chaos in their wake. This group called themselves the Elite, and when detaching themselves from other light beings, their form could only maintain its structure for a short time. The 7 traveled together and would leave the planet they were on once it was destroyed or uninhabitable. The Elite's plan on each planet would not happen overnight. It would take time for the 7 to convert the species to a way of control with flashy toys and false enjoyment. All the while, they would take natural resources from the planet and begin to feed off of others. The 7 enjoyed war, destruction, and controlling all. For playing with soul lives is a game to them. Makihikana asked the elders how they could capture these wisps, get them off the Lyrans, and imprison them so no other planet or species had to endure what was just beginning to happen to them. The elders advised Makihikana in riddles, explaining the balance between the light and dark. The light must be shown to the dark, for the dark to see their ways, and the dark must be revealed to the light, for the light to see their shadows. There is one consciousness. The dark should not be condemned and written off, for we all come from one source. One must not stand by and allow atrocities to happen either. There must be balance. Makihikana was more confused than ever. This was not the answer she sought. But yet, maybe it was that simple. Perhaps it was showing the 7 just enough light that they had the chance to see their ways and the harm they were causing. Could they see the light? Makihikana went ahead with her plan and sent out the invitations asking the 7 if they would accept her proposal to be on the jury of her upcoming case. She needed an immediate response for the next day, for the hearing would begin in 1 week. To her glee, all 7 replied and accepted their positions. The 7 replied it was time that they had been rightfully recognized and would uphold the integrity and an open mind of those on trial. Makihikana and her friends knew the enormity of the task at hand. They also knew that if their confrontation didn't work, they might be outcasts from their community. Makihikana knew she needed many Lyrans to help her. Makihikana had seen thousands of cases throughout her years as a judge. With her fair rulings, there rarely was a defendant or plaintiff left worse than when they arrived at the courthouse. Makihikana was seen as a well-rounded Lyran, with insight, compassion, and the ability to see all sides. She sent word to all of her cases, asking and pleading with them to now be the ones to judge an issue that could affect all Lyrans. Makikikana asked them to be present at the courthouse in a week and keep an open mind with the information that would come forward. 7 days later, Makikikana and her friends had everything in order. They called in extra security and decided if the majority of her past cases were to show up, they would need to hold the trial outside in front of the courthouse to accommodate the masses. That is precisely what ended up happening. Little by little, all of Makikikana's prior cases showed up. Security lined the perimeter of the courthouse yard and area, and 7 seats were lined up on one side, while hundreds of chairs lined the other. Makikikana has strategically asked her cases to come before the 7 would arrive. Hundreds of Lyrans excitedly sat down and awaited instruction from Makikikana. When all her clients sat down, a few minutes later, the 7 arrived. The 7 were taken aback by the number of Lyrans present and wondered why this case was being held outside. They quickly covered their reactions with smiles and nods to the crowds and walked down a path in front of Makikikana. Lord Leo spoke first. Makikikana, this is quite a surprise. I believe almost every Lyran is here. Tell me, what kind of case is this? How are we to judge in a setting such as this? Makikikana graciously smiled, asked the 7 to sit in their assigned chairs, and quietly spoke so only their ears could hear. Thank you all for accepting this great role for our society. To be the jury at your level shows everyone here today how truly important you are and how much you are needed. With those tongue-in-cheek comments from Makikikana, the 7 were more at ease and settled into their seats. Let us begin, shall we? Makikikana said, speaking directly to the 7. Makikikana took a breath. She could do this. She didn't know the outcome, but she knew she had to try. Her friends were there with the security and nodded her on. Dear fellow Lyrans, I thank you for arriving here today. I ask you all to come forward as I need your help today. You are about to hear information that affects us all. Through your judgment, I ask that you keep an open mind and have an overall view of the well-being of all Lyrans. This hearing may seem like a life or death situation, and it is. The information you will decipher will affect us as a species. In the previous months, we have seen greater discord in our communities, leading to a separation among our society. The 7 looked at each other and knew. They knew what was happening and stood up to leave. Makikikana planned for this to happen and nodded for the extra security guards to come and stand behind the 7. The 7 reluctantly sat down, and Makikikana proceeded. I ask each of you to think back to a few months ago when we use our intellect, intuition, and knowledge daily. When was the last time that you used all 3 of these attributes at once? How is it that the higher the feathers on your heads, the greater we are noticed? How is it that every Lyran now wants to be invited to discriminatory parties, and only a few are selected? And if you're lucky enough to go, you would have done shameful things to hurt yourselves or others to get there. The audience started to chat amongst themselves, acknowledging Makikikana's words, and everyone became still once more. It felt like a bucket of cold water had been doused on them. These are the 7, the elite, that I present to you for judgment today. I will present facts of truth and ask that you take in what you hear today for the greater good of us all. The 7 were again trying to walk away, and even more security guards had to hold down the elite to keep them secure and detained. Makikikana began and described to the crowd when she first noticed the change in their society, and finished with her vision of the dark wisps and her discussion with the elders. When Makikikana concluded her testimony, the 7 Lyrans slumped unconsciously in their chairs as the wisps detached. They were ratted out, and it was time to go. The audience was taken aback and shaken when the dark wisps floated before them. They hadn't believed Makikikana's tale to be valid until now. The wisps spoke in hissing sounds. Your lives could have changed for the greater good with wealth, prestige, and power. Now you have nothing. Your society will not advance. There's nothing to look forward to. We will not waste our time on any of you any longer. As they started to weave through the crowds, Makikikana shouted, "Wait! The purpose of this hearing is not to shame you. It is to wake our society to who you are and what you're doing. We can help you. No soul wants this kind of life and to damage others in such a way. There is much more than prestige and the falsehood of power. What about honor, joy, and love? What about respect and morals? Don't you want to stop running? Don't you want to be loved?" The wisps had no intent on listening or sticking around. However, the seed was planted. These questions would repeatedly play in their thoughts with every planet they overtook, until a spark was lit that there might be another way. This would be when waves of light-filled souls were brought to Earth to bring balance. The wisps quickly left Lyra and moved to a few other planets until they found Earth. They had learned from being in Makikikana's trial and the open display of judgment for all to see. The elite now knew that when awakened others saw them, the truth would come out. However, when the majority are unawakened, the elite can continue doing what they want without others noticing. That is how the elite knew their plan would work on Earth for a long time. Earth is a lower dimensional planet, and the elite had the vibration working in their favor. If they could keep as many humans as possible asleep, they would have control over what they wanted: power, prestige, and unlimited access to feeding off of others. Makikikana was a hero that day within Lyra, and this is written in the Akashic records about her role that changed her species' outcome. Unfortunately, Makikikana's trial was not enough to change the minds of the elite, but this will soon happen on Earth. As many souls awaken, the truths will emerge about the realities that have been hidden for far too long. We share this memory of Makikikana to show humanity how long the elite have been at this game and how it will now end on Earth. Humans are moving into a time of trusting their insight, intuition, and knowledge from deep within. Flashy toys and false levels of joy will no longer be incorporated on a soul level, for the frequency of Earth is moving to a higher vibration where the elite will have no choice but to join the light or be pulled from this vibration, exposed for all to see.